That is an area when people go to the grocery store and they're trying to buy a pound of meat, 2 pounds of meat, 10 pounds of meat. The prices are higher. That is, in his view, and the view of our Secretary of Agriculture, because of, you could call it corporate greed, sure. You could call it jacking up prices during a pandemic.
You see how the media, desperate for an out, tease it up for the bunt by Psaki? So they're starting to ask questions. So one of them asked Psaki in the White House yesterday. They say, hey, Peppermint, listen, we got an issue with this debt ceiling going up, and people are concerned on the streets. Because this is what even the liberal outlets are starting to hear. Listen to Psaki. She's like, hey, listen, we can't find anybody concerned about the debt ceiling. Now, I don't know what you're talking about. You want to talk about ridiculous, humiliating spin. Here, check this out.
What do you say to Americans who see this as yet another example of Congress kicking the can down the road?
Well, I would say that in what way? I'm not sure who is saying that.
It until 2023, but it's going to come up again right after the midterms. What do you say to people who say we're just going to be having the same conversation a little bit over a year from now?
I'm not sure what American person is saying that or is concerned about the debt limit, but maybe there is somebody you've met on the street. I don't know.
Maybe there's just one person out there concerned with our now approaching $30 trillion debt. Maybe there's just one person out there. This is how embarrassing. Imagine having her job, trying to be the forward face to the media of the single worst presidency in modern U.S. history.
Oh,
can you imagine?
No.
I mean, there's right. There's nothing this woman can take credit for, because nothing good is happening under Biden. Nothing. There is nothing to hang their hat on. So every day it's just a matter of, how am I going to lie about the bad stuff? Here's exhibit 2 right here of how this is. I'm telling you, they're embarrassed and they know it, and the spin is going to get uglier. So the inflation crisis is out of control. We've been covering it here, for years now. How inflation and bad inflation was really bad inflation. It's all a matter of degree. Was inevitable. So the cost of meat, protein, which people need. You need protein. You need protein in your diet. The cost of meat is exploding, which is deeply impacting seniors on fixed budgets, people who haven't gotten a raise at work, middle-class Americans, anyone who needs to eat which pretty much is all of us, is being impacted by the explosion in food prices. So Psaki and them have to sit around the office and they have to say to themselves, gosh, this just started under us. Inflation was under control until we got in office and started printing money. What do we do? What do we do? What do we do? So here's Psaki. They figured out, I got it. Let's blame the meat producers. Here, check this out.
There are several progressive groups and lawmakers who are increasingly vocalizing the idea that high inflation is being driven by corporate greed, including companies with high profits, some of whom have met at the White House with the president in recent months. Does the president endorse that idea? Does he think that corporate greed is the big driver of inflation right now?
Well, I think that the president thinks the way people across the country, American families, digest inflation is by price increases. And if you look at industry to industry, it's a little different. So, for example, the president, the Secretary of Agriculture have both spoken to what we've seen as the greed of meat conglomerates. That is an area where people go to the grocery store and they're trying to buy a pound of meat, 2 pounds of meat, 10 pounds of meat. The prices are higher. That is, in his view, and the view of our Secretary of Agriculture, because of, you could call it corporate greed, sure. You could call it jacking up prices during a pandemic.
You see how the media, desperate for an out, tease it up for the bunt by Psaki? Hey, there's a rumor out there that corporate greed. Here, folks, you get it?
Yeah, they weren't.
Wink it or not.
They weren't that greedy a couple months ago.
Yeah, it was a greed. Greed is new, by the way, Joe. Greed's new. We just figured out greed just happened under Biden. Keep in mind, that's another thing they can't seem to answer. How corporate greed is just a new thing in the Biden administration. There was no corporate greed before. There's only corporate greed now, which is very puzzling. But here's what Psaki won't tell you, because she's a liar and disgraced herself repeatedly. I don't ever expect her to say, hey, maybe I should have some dignity and, tell the truth once in a while. Forget it. These people have no dignity at all. Just the news article, be in my newsletter today if you'd like to read it. Wholesale prices increased nearly 10% in November year over year, the fastest pace on record. So, folks, if it's the meat producers and the producers of the products who are being greedy, charging you more, Why is it that the prices they're paying, because remember, they're consumers too, right? You ever heard of business-to-business transactions? If you're a leftist, you have no idea what that means. If you're a conservative and you've got a functioning brain cell, that means businesses have to supply themselves with inputs too for their outputs. I know liberals are puzzled by all this. So businesses like meat producers have to pay for inputs as well. They have to pay to purchase cows, to purchase feed, to take care of their farmland, to purchase fertilizer on their farmland. Liberals are puzzled by all of this. Don't you find it odd if the corporations and businesses and the meat conglomerates, I love how she throws that conglomerates in there to just attack American farmers and beef producers. I love how she throws that in there, right? Wouldn't it be really strange if the producers were paying 10% more year over year and you're still only paying 7% more year over year? Sounds to me like the producers are actually paying more than you are, meaning they haven't, it's a simplified explanation, I get it, but haven't passed on en masse all of their costs onto you yet. If the corporations and the meat conglomerates were being greedy, their prices would go up 7% and your prices would go up 10%, right? Libs, I know this is hard. I get it. I know math doesn't work for you, right? But their prices have gone up 10%, and yet prices in the economy for the consumer buying the products as the end producer and the end consumer of it have only gone up 7%. Only 7%. And I say that only term very loosely because we haven't seen that number since 1982.
You just heard the Dan Bongino Show.